is the Revolutionary Guard's message to Israel. War games in Iran, including firing ballistic and cruise missiles. One of the targets resembles Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor. The head of Iran's armed forces, Staff Major General Mohammad Bagheri, says 16 ballistic missiles of varying classes were fired simultaneously. Tehran has one of the biggest missile programs in the Middle East, regarding such weapons as an important deterrent and retaliatory force against the United States and other adversaries in the event of war. Just days after those drills, world powers are back in Vienna trying to salvage what is left of the 2015 nuclear deal. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action has been unraveling since the U.S. withdrew from it in 2018 and imposed a series of new sanctions on Iran. And that prompted Iranian officials to reduce their compliance with the deal, which means their nuclear program has progressed. Robert Kelly is a former director of the International Atomic Energy Agency and a nuclear engineer. He says Iran's been backed into a corner.
Each time there's a sabotage event that blows up some of their facilities, or the U.S. adds more sanctions, they've tended to push back and do something provocative. And I think they've gone past the point of reasonable provocations. They're now, they've gone too far.
World powers have been insisting that Iran's ballistic missile program needs to be part of that deal, a notion that's continuously dismissed by Iran. As the 8th round of talks continue here in the Austrian capital, Israel opposes these efforts and has long threatened military action if diplomacy fails. And that is just one of the many reasons time is of the essence.
There is a sense of urgency in all delegations that this negotiation has to be finished in a relative reasonable period of time. Again, I wouldn't put limits, but we are talking about weeks, not about months.
The head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, Mohammad Eslami, recently told a Russian media outlet that Iran does not intend to go beyond its current enrichment levels of 60%, a move all Western powers have warned would cross a red line.
Iran says its nuclear program has always been for civilian use, a statement some don't believe, while it continues to stockpile highly enriched uranium. Officials here say for tensions to ease and for Iran to limit its nuclear program, the talks here must succeed, and failure will have far-reaching consequences. Dorsa Jabari, Al Jazeera, Vienna.
Latest news, Israel and Iran. Headliner, Jerusalem Post, Fateful Mossad, IDF war over Iran nukes continues analysis. Dated January 5th, 2022. Another round of the fateful war of words between the Mossad and Israeli military intelligence continued this week, with ministers leaking their classified contrary views on the Iran nuclear negotiations to Walla between Tuesday and Wednesday. IDF Intelligence Chief Major General Ahran Haluva now favors some kind of new version of the nuclear deal to slow Iranian progress and buy time for planning a potential IDF strike, while Mossad Director David Barnea is against any but a radically improved deal. The disagreement between them seems remarkable, but is in fact just another round of the ongoing debate between the intelligence heavyweights. Who wins over the decision makers? Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Defense Minister Benny Gantz, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid could have fateful consequences for Israel and the world. First, Jerusalem, or certainly Lapid, is shifting its signaling from being able to prevent the deal to its hopes that its efforts will improve a likely deal between the world powers and the Islamic Republic. Second, through Berea and IDF Chief of Staff General Lieutenant General Aviv Kohavi have appeared to be in lockstep opposition to the deal since a major speech by Kohavi in January 2020. There have always been gradations in their views, and the current scenario is starting to flesh these out. In October of 2020, outgoing IDF Intelligence Analysis Chief Brigadier General Dror Shalom gave a stunning on-record interview addressing overall policy, the timing of a potential Iranian nuclear weapon, and Israeli intelligence's ability to catch the Islamic Republic before it succeeds at breaking out to one. On all 3 points, Shalom's views and the IDF confirmed that month that his views represented the existing consensus of the analysis wing of the IDF intelligence at the time, worked neatly into those of the top former and current IDF officials, while clashing with the views of then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then Mossad Director Yossi Cohn. Long before Bennett came along, Shalom said that to date, leaving the Iran nuclear deal and the maximum pressure campaign are not proven to be the best policy or slowed Tehran's drive toward a bomb. The main point to support this, even that October, was that the Islamic Republic had much more enriched uranium than before the campaign. Next, he said that even if the Ayatollahs decided tomorrow that they were ready to develop a nuclear bomb, it would take another 2 years. Finally, he said that while there was a good chance that Israeli intelligence would detect such an Iranian attempt to dash over the nuclear threshold, it was not a sure thing. In contrast, Netanyahu and Cohn said that the maximum pressure campaigns, leaving the Iran agreement, were major improvements in confronting Iran's nuclear ambitions. They had declared that Tehran in October of 2020 was only 3 to 4 months away from enriching uranium for a nuclear weapon. Now, most experts say it's only 3 to 4 weeks. Finally, then Intelligence Minister Eli Cohn and others had given the impression that the coverage of Israeli intelligence in Iran at the time was virtually unlimited for finding out about any major developments. The summer 2020 series of seemingly endless explosions in Iranian nuclear and other installations, some of which have been attributed by foreign sources to Israel, supported the view of how deeply the Jewish state had penetrated Iran. For outsiders, disagreements at these highest levels of Israeli intelligence would seem very confusing. But for insiders, there is an inherent fault line between the Mossad and the IDF and how they operate and view the world, especially Tehran. Mossad is confident about operating covertly and below the surface, even during peacetime or times short of war. Like Cohn, Barnea is ready and willing to continue to sabotage Iranian nuclear facilities on an ongoing basis, regardless of what the rest of the world thinks. In fact, Barnea's Mossad reportedly did so already both in June and September of 2020. In contrast, the IDF will only be called into service against Iran if it would need to undertake one of the largest, highly complex, most dangerous aerial strikes in history. Yes, it has been attacking relatively easy targets in Syria and sometimes Lebanon or Iraq for the last few years, even without a full declared war. However, these targets are nothing compared to the deep underground, spread out, and much more highly defended nuclear targets of the Iranians. Put simply, the IDF has more risk than the Mossad if it is pushed to act soon. One difference in the debate on the timing is that the officials are taking different matters into their hands. Discussing Iran would be a problem, even though Israel itself is trying to bend the knee. Despite the intrigue of a Mossad versus IDF debate, in the end, it is Bennett, Gantz, and Lapid who will need to make the fateful decision of how to respond to a possible new joint comprehensive plan of action for a less for less version nuclear deal that may be agreed to in Vienna over the coming weeks and months. According to a mix of their combined actions and statements over time, no matter what one of them says in one particular speech, all signs indicate that they will grudgingly swallow a new U.S. deal without taking major action, while reserving the right to act as if they catch Iran cheating in the future. Defense News headliner: Israel inks $3 billion deal for KC-46 tankers and CH-53 helos, dated January 4th. 2022. Israel's Defense Ministry has agreed to purchase 2 Boeing KC-46A tankers and 12 Lockheed Martin CH-53K helicopters in a long-expected deal. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz said on an agreement which was signed on December 30th, these procurement agreements are significant milestones in the Israeli Defense Forces buildup process. We continue to strengthen our capabilities and to change and adapt our Air Force to face future challenges both near and far. The KC-46 deal is worth about $1.1 billion, and the helicopter deal is worth another $2 billion. The agreement includes an option for 6 more helicopters, the ministry said, adding that the first will arrive by 2026. It's unclear when the KC-46s will arrive, and the ministry did not provide a timeline. Israel has been working on a KC-46 deal for years and has sought to acquire new helicopters. The helicopter deal was cleared by the U.S. State Department in July of 2021. Both aircraft are needed to replace Israel's aging fleet. The country has undergone several elections since 2018, and the lack of a stable government postponed some procurement efforts until early last year. February 2021, Israel agreed to a procurement program for 2 KC-46s with the signing of a letter of offer and acceptance. At the time, Israel said it would buy more F-35 Joint Strike Fighters and heavy lift helicopters to replace the CH-53 Yes Sir helicopters. The procurement programs were conducted in coordination with the U.S. military channels using the Foreign Ministry Financing Program, the ministry said at the time. We will continue to work to complete the agreements that will enable the IDF to fulfill its purpose and to move forward with the missions facing us in the various arenas, near and far, at sea, in the air, on land, and even in cyberspace. Israel said the latest aircraft procurements are part of a larger program undertaken by the Ministry of Defense, together with the IDF over the last year and a half, with the aim of strengthening the IDF capabilities, force buildup, and preparedness to face existing and future threats. These include more F-35s, as well as the refueling aircraft, helicopters, and munitions. Israel has a multi-layered air defense system consisting of Iron Dome, David's Sling and Arrow, programs supported by the United States, and involving close cooperation with the U.S. Missile Defense Agency. Israel is also outfitting its new SAR-6 corvettes and working on a future armored fighting vehicle. That's the latest news. Now my thoughts. The buildup is just the real deal regarding talks in Vienna or talks with the IDF. The IDF Mossad could care less about the Vienna talks. They want a conflict. They've been badgering Iran for the last 25 years. Even longer. And it's always the U.S. that bears the brunt, because it'll be the U.S. military that'll be used, along with the coalition, to engage in military conflict in a war that will far exceed Iraq and Afghanistan combined. The death of hegemony in the region forever, and the continued war on the Salafists, the Wahhabis in the Gulf, led by Saudi Arabia and King Salman, against the Shia majority in Iran. Iran is also home to more Jews than most Gulf states. In fact, all of them. The problem stems from the fact that Israel itself is not a very rich country. So you ask yourself, why? Why is the United States at the beck and call of Israel? They offer nothing but technology. They spy on the American government. They sell those secrets to their allies, or their feigned allies in the region. Meanwhile, just days ago, thousands of people rallied in the Iraqi capital to mark the second anniversary of the killing of a revered Iranian commander, General Qasem Soleimani, who headed the Quds Force, and the Foreign Operations Arm of the Revolutionary Guard. Killed by a drone strike on January 3rd, 2020. In fact, it was Soleimani, as well as the pro-Iranian Hashad, was known as the Population Mobilization Forces, Hezbollah proxies who are fighting, who are actually engaging in the war of terror against the Wahhabis, supported by the CIA and the Gulf in Syria. Who does Israel attack? Those Iranian proxy forces. And then proclaim that Iran is the greatest exporter of international Islamic terrorism in the world. Now, for those who follow this channel and watch my videos, you are well educated enough to know that this is demonstrably false. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is built on the principles of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and Wahhabism, which gave rise to Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Abu Sayyaf, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Jabhat al-Nusra, and others in Southeast Asia, Pacific Indian region. And Iran currently, along with the Syrian armed forces, and even at one time using Soviet aerial bombings on Islamic State munition outposts, which turned the tide of the war in Syria's favor. The countries that called for the fall of Syria are now trying to work relations or repairing relations with Syria. One country in particular is Jordan. Jordan, under King Abdullah II, actually approved a CIA-led Operation Timber Sycamore, which was funding and training Wahhabi militants in Syria to overthrow the Bashar al-Assad government. Israel itself has been an antagonist, and the citizens of Israel have been the victim. I'm talking about Jews and Palestinians. They're victim to a very repressive nationalist group called Likuds or the Likudniks, as well as the antagonists of the Israeli government under current the current government led by Isaac Herzog, the president, and Naftali Bennett, the prime minister. And don't forget Benny Gantz, defense minister. These people don't want peace. Now, they are in conflict with one another about how to approach Iran. How do you approach this adversary? Because unlike the Arab states, Iran is a formidable army, as well as a formidable navy. They know Israel's secrets, just as Israel knows theirs. Spies on both sides have penetrated the defenses and intelligence services over the last 50 years. And now it is a matter of time of how do you take advantage of those weaknesses? Who will suffer the most? Iranians, as well as their allies, Lebanon, Syria. And that's also taken an effect if Russia does not intervene, which they probably won't. On the other hand, if this war will come to fruition, the United States will be the country that suffers right behind Iran, economically, mentally, or spiritually, physically. It'll be their troops, along with the coalition, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, Germany, France. But it'll be the United States at the front lines. It won't be Israel. It won't be Saudi Arabia, the antagonists. It'll be the United States. And if you're still arguing over civil disobedience inside the United States or improved conditions regarding the social sectors of education, healthcare, Social Security, you are not looking at the bigger picture, which will affect everything, our way of life, just like COVID did and their restrictions. This war, if it were to ever come to fruition, would be catastrophic. The Iranians, the United States, its coalition partners. And I'm going to need you to bring about this message of anti-war, because it affects everybody, every walk of life. And we could unify both the left and right. And we could get millions of people behind us, just like we did in the second Iraq war, where we saw global protests in the millions. And you'll say, yeah, but what did it achieve? We went to war with Iraq. We need to do more. We need a unified, informed, educated public. And, you know, I'm a nobody. And I do these videos, not for me. I do it because I want to see an educated public. And what I see is an ignorant public fighting and bickering and becoming divisive over issues that are transparent. And they're made this way to dissuade us from the more important topics that will affect the global community and benefit the affluent few.